first will be last. The Word of God.
Thank you. Good morning, a pleasure to be back. Earlier on, Marlene was playing, there was a song, All Through the Night. I don't know, are you able just to play the first few notes of that one again? The All Through the Night?
Oh, absolutely.
It's quite interesting because when I heard it, I recognise the tune, but the words I know are Arhida Nos, which is, it's Welsh, and I checked it out. It is actually a Welsh tune, so we'll just listen to it for a moment.
Hey, Paul, fix your mic.
So you can hear clearly? Yeah. Yeah, so the words to this are actually, this is a Welsh tune, it was written in Welsh, all Arhida Nos, but it means all through the night. But
Keep going.
no, that's fine, but it's nice to hear it again, and it's so well played. I often start with a bit of a sense of humour. I don't really have any humorous things I was going to say, other than I do have a memory, and I'm going to use Arlene here at the back, who's been really very complimentary about the messages I've given. And more recently, there was some social event up in the foothills, and in somebody's wealthy house, and we were there. And then Arlene arrived with her husband, and who doesn't come to church, and she introduced me, and he said, "Oh, you're Paul. She talks about you all the time. Tell me a joke." So I teased and said, "Oh, that's what I'm famous for, is it? Telling jokes." But I'm well aware that, and I do appreciate the appreciation and encouragement I get. And part of a sense of humour. I mean, Jesus had a sense of humour. Some of the things he said, if you think about it, are quite funny. He talked about people who are so particular in finding fault in other people. He said, you're like people trying to pull the speck of dust out of somebody else's eye, and you have a huge beam of wood in your own eye. It's a funny illustration, and he had a sense of humour, and of course, the Lord has a sense of humour. And some of the, I think I've used the illustration before, penguins and various different animals. I mean, they can be quite humorous. They do say that if you want to make God laugh, it's possible. You just need to tell him your plans. But I think in one sense that's not fair, because if you do prayerfully make your plans with the Lord, those are plans that can really work out, and sometimes quite astoundingly. The passage that we just read there, the theme I wanted to talk about today is God's extravagant love and mercy. And Jesus gave an illustration. He was given the illustration because, again, the religious people of his time, they didn't like the fact that he was mixing with prostitutes, alcoholics, people who were not a success in life. Their lives were in a mess, and yet Jesus was spending time with them. He said to the religious people, were saying, "Why are you mixing with them? We're the upright, righteous people. What do you want to do with them?" And at one point he said, "Look, it's not the people that feel that they are well that need a doctor. It's the people that are sick." And actually, the religious people were quite sick, but they didn't realize it, But he told this story. He said, "Look, God's kingdom, it's like a landowner who owns a vineyard." There are vineyards around here. And so you can picture that. Somebody owns a vineyard and they need some day workers. I do remember when I first came to California 23 years ago, I was down in the Encinitas area, and there was just a junction, and there were a load of Hispanic people, men, milling around in the morning. And I wondered, what are they doing there? And then various cars would pull up. The guy would talk to somebody and then take a few of the men off. Well, they were looking for a day's work, and people were picking them up. I haven't seen that so much around here, but I remember noticing it, and that's what was going on. Basically, there was no social security at Jesus' time. People gave alms in the synagogues, and that could be shared with the poor. But men who needed a day's work would just go and gather in the marketplace. And this quite wealthy landowner comes along early in the morning. He needs work done in his vineyard, and so he says to these workers, look, go and work in my vineyard, and I'll pay you a fair wage for the day. And they're very pleased, and off they go. But the owner goes back, several hours later, and there's some more men milling around. So he says to them, I go and work in my vineyard, I'll pay you a fair wage. And he does it lunchtime. And then he goes back in the mid-afternoon, and there's some men there, and he says, what are you doing here? And they say, we haven't got any work. He says, well, go and work in my vineyard, I'll pay you a fair wage. And then about 5 in the evening, only a few hours before it gets dark, he goes there again. There are a couple of men there. He sends them to the vineyard and says, I'll pay you a fair wage. So then at the end of the day, he lines everybody up, and he tells his foreman, start by paying the ones who only came an hour or two ago. And they are given a full day's wage. So they're really pleased. And then the others are seeing this, and they're thinking, wow, we worked all day. So if he's giving them that much, what's he going to give us? But everybody gets a fair day's wage. And the ones who've been working all day say, this isn't fair. It's not right. Why are you giving those people that amount when we've worked all day and they haven't? And the owner says, look, it's up to me what I give. I've given you a fair day's wage. If I want to pay these people, even though it's right at the end of the day, it's up to me. And Jesus was using it as an illustration of God's love and God's mercy and kindness to us, what God's character is like. And some people don't like it. Why is he forgiving those people? I feel I've been good most of my life, and yet there's these people, and yet he's extravagantly pouring his love on them. People don't like it, but it is the character of God. He is very generous. He's very merciful, and obviously he wants us to be like that. There is a passage in the Gospel of Mark where, Jesus is... the people end up being basically encouraged by the religious leaders to cry, crucify Jesus, crucify him, when the Romans... They don't really think Jesus has done anything wrong. Pilate examines Jesus and can't find a thing wrong with what he says. He's ready to let Jesus go, but the people are crying, crucify him, crucify him. So Pilate wants to keep the crowd happy. He agrees to have Jesus crucified. There's a description. As they came out of the city, they see an African man, Simon, from Libya. And because Jesus is so weak from the whipping that he's had, he can't carry his cross. And he's stumbling. So they get this strong guy from Libya to carry the cross. They bring Jesus to Golgotha, and they nail his hands and his feet to the cross. And that would have been through here, apparently, because if it went here, it would rip out. But inside there, it would hold. He's been put to death by crucifixion, and basically it's torture. They also crucified, this is what Mark says, they crucified 2 criminals either side of him. And... which had been prophesied in the scriptures, that Jesus was the Messiah would be considered a criminal. People who passed by were shaking their heads and ridiculing him because Jesus, they said, he's made all these high prophecies about all he's going to achieve, and look at him, he's dying there on the cross. They're saying to him, you boasted. At one point, Jesus said, destroy this temple and I'll raise it up in 3 days. They thought he meant the physical temple, but he was talking about the temple of his body. But they're saying, you said you're going to raise the temple up. Why don't you save yourself now? Come down from the cross. And the priests, the religious people, were mocking him and laughing at him. He saved others because he did, and they'd seen him doing very kind and generous and supernatural things to others. Why can't he save himself? Is he supposed to be the Messiah? And even in Mark, it says, even the two criminals crucified either side of him were mocking Jesus and hurling insults at him. Suddenly, around midday, the sky went dark. And by 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Jesus cried out, and basically they thought, wow, he's crying out. Maybe he's crying out for Elijah. They could hear something he was saying. Quick, let's revive him. So they get some vinegary wine, put it on his lips to bring him back to alert. They want to see. They said, let's see what happens. See if Elijah comes to rescue him. With all this going on, the soldier that was in charge of the crucifixion is seeing all this, and he sees the way Jesus conducts himself. He said, there's no doubt this man is the Son of God. There's all sorts of things going on around the cross. Now, that's the passage in Mark. It's slightly different in the Gospel of Luke, which is interesting because if you go and read, let's say, an account of a football match in different newspapers, you're going to get basically the genuine account of the match. But some people see things slightly different. And from a historian point of view, when they're dealing with, history and documents from the past, to make sure nothing's a fabrication, one of the things they look for is if there's separate accounts that they generally agree, but they don't quite agree. That's typical of something that's true. And in this case, in the book of in Luke, Luke's describing what's happening, and then let me find this bit. This time the soldiers, they gambling over Jesus' piece of clothing. A great crowd gathered. The religious leaders are sneering and mocking Jesus. Look at this man, he can't save himself. The soldiers join in mocking him. And then one of the criminals, it says, kept on ridiculing Jesus, saying, what kind of Messiah are you? Save yourself and save us from this death. But the other criminal, now in Mark it says both of them were, just mocking him. And that may have been the case for a time. But one of the criminals, something happened. And the other criminal says to the others, don't you fear God? We're about to die. We deserve to be condemned. We're just being repaid for what we've done. They were thieves. They were being crucified. But this man, he's done nothing wrong. And then he turns to Jesus and he said, I beg you, Jesus, show me grace and take me with you to your everlasting kingdom. This is the cigarette end of a life. He's just about to die. And he's lived his life as a thief, which means there's a lot of people he's hurt and damaged. And he says to Jesus, take me with you. And Jesus says, I promise you, this very day, you will enter paradise with me. It's the same thing as the guy that just has only worked an hour in the vineyard, just at the end, and yet he gets a great reward. The whole thing of what happened after Jesus died and then rose again, where he went in the invisible realm, we don't fully understand all of that. Paradise, heaven, we don't understand the spiritual realm. And Jesus said to his disciples, look, if you can't understand the things I tell you about the earth, you'll never understand right now the things about heaven and the supernatural. But Jesus said to this man, you will be with me today in paradise. That's an extravagant, merciful God. And that is that's the character of the Lord. And he's like that with us. He's very generous. And sometimes people just don't like it. The religious people had problems all the time with, the fact of how generous he was. He started to tell at one point, because of the way that they just didn't like that he mixed with all these sort of people with problems. So he told a couple of parables trying to get the religious people to understand. This is Luke chapter 15. Many dishonest tax collectors. I mean, that may be a surprise to you that tax collectors can be dishonest, but there you go. And other notorious sinners. They were gathering around and listening to Jesus as he taught the people. And this raised concerns amongst the Jewish religious leaders and experts of the law. What are these people even allowed here? I do remember back in Wales, I ended up being involved with a group that was helping people that had drug and alcohol problems. And it was a Christian group, and I got invited along. I ended up, basically helping to lead the group. I think because I never had a problem with drugs or alcohol, the people in the group who had, the fact that I didn't think I was any better than them, and just to treat them with respect and normality was really healing for them. So we would meet on a Sunday afternoon in the church building, but the idea was that they might want to come to church in the morning. But when they started to come to the church in the morning, I mean, halfway through the service, they had to go outside and have a cigarette, and they weren't necessarily all done up in their Sunday clothes. And the people in the church, some of the people, they didn't like it, and they'd complain about these people, and then they'd go into church with somebody standing outside smoking, The fact that the person was smoking and they weren't on heroin, they weren't seeing that side of it, So Jesus is mixing with all these people, and the notorious sinners, they're actually interested in what he's got to say, which sadly they weren't interested in what the religious leaders had to say. So the religious leaders are grumbling. They said, look how this man associates with all these notorious sinners, and he welcomes them all. So Jesus turns to them and he says, there was a shepherd with 100 lambs. One of the lambs wandered away. So the shepherd left the 99 lambs and he went to find the one that was lost. And he didn't stop until he found the lost one. And then with exuberant joy, he raised it up, he put it on his shoulders, and he carried it back with cheerful delight. When he got home, he called all his friends and neighbors. He said, let's have a party. Come and celebrate with me the return of my lost lamb. It wandered away, but I found it and I brought it home. And then Jesus said to the religious people, in the same way there'll be a glorious celebration in heaven over the rescue of one lost sinner who repents, comes back home and returns to the fold, more so than all the righteous people who never strayed away. He saw another one of a lady. He said she had 10 valuable silver coins, but she lost one. So she did everything she could, looked in every nook and cranny. She made a big effort, and finally she found it. And then she calls her friends and says, look, let's celebrate. I found the coin that I lost. And Jesus said that's the way God responds every time somebody who's gone away from God repents and turns to him. And all the angels in heaven, let's have a joyful celebration of people coming back to God. And there was also the story of the, you've probably heard of it, of the prodigal son. Basically, Jesus said there's a father owns land, and what they would do is then the sons it wouldn't be just the oldest inherited everything, it would be they'd split it. So there's two sons. The younger one says, look, Father, don't you think it's time, that you gave me my share of my estate? In some ways, Prince Charles might have been wanting to say that to his mom in England, because it was a long, long time before he managed to, take the throne. But the son is saying, look, I don't want to have to wait. And the father is generous. So the father sells what he needs to sell, and he gives his son, a large amount of money. So the son goes away to a faraway country, and he uses it all. There's various ways of translating it: extravagant, reckless living, prodigal living. Basically, it would have been, the implications of it all is, alcohol, prostitutes, just riotous living, paying for everybody else's, and he would be super popular because, paying all the bills, great. But then everything's spent. Then there's a severe famine in the land. The friends aren't around anymore, not ready to help. And he ends up begging a farmer to give him some work. And he's sent out to feed the pigs. And he was so hungry that he even started to eat the slop for the pigs. Because no one was giving him any food. And he's finally humiliated, and he thinks to himself, back home, I had a home, I had a father that loved me, family, and now I'm eating this slop of pigs. And that can happen to us sometimes. We sometimes think, well, how did I end up here, And there's a time when people hit rock bottom and think, okay, well, I'm ready to turn around. Let's find a different way to live. And that's where, the Lord will pick his time and speak to people and talk about his glorious, extravagant, merciful love, how he's ready to restore people, whether it's a dying thief on a cross, somebody who hasn't spent most of their life serving him. He's ready to reach out. So the son goes home, and he's thinking, there's lots of people working for my father. I'll ask for a job. Perhaps I can get a job too and just work there because I've wasted all my inheritance. So he goes back, travels back, and then he says, look, Father, I was wrong. I've sinned against you. I'll never be worthy to be called your son. So treat me like one of your employees. I mean, it's a good start. It's off. I'm wrong. I'm sorry is a good way to put things right with other people and with God. No justification. I don't have the right to be your son. Would you have mercy on me and give me a job? So when he gets there, the father is looking to the horizon, wondering whether and when his son will come home. And it's the same way with the Lord. He's looking out for us as human beings. He's longing and wanting us to come home to him. So the father races out, sweeps up the son in his arms. He's kissing him, hugging him. The son said, Father, I was wrong. I've sinned against you. I could never deserve to be called your son. Just let me be. And the father interrupts and said, Son, you're home now. Turning to his servants, he said, quick, bring me the best robe. Put it on him. Bring me a ring, a seal of sonship. I'll put it on his finger. Bring me the best shoes. Let's prepare a great feast and celebrate. Because my son was dead and now he's alive. Once he's lost, but now he's found. And everybody celebrated with overflowing joy. Apart from one person, which is the older son. The older son was out working in the field. And when his brother comes back, he can hear music, he can hear dancing. He asks one of the servants, what's going on? And the servants say, well, it's your younger brother. He's come home, and your father's throwing a party to celebrate his homecoming. And the older son gets angry, and he wouldn't even go in. I'm not going to celebrate. This is crazy. So his father comes out, because the father loves him just as much, and says, because the father must be saying, where's my older son? So he's out in the field, he won't come in. So he goes out and finds him, and he says, come and feast with us. And the son said, look, Father, how many years have I worked for you like a slave? Maybe an exaggeration. performing every duty you've ever asked as a faithful son, and I've never once disobeyed you, but you've never thrown a party for me because of my faithfulness. Never once have you given me a goat to feast on and celebrate with your friends, with my friends. Look at my brother. He comes back home after wasting your wealth on prostitutes and reckless living, and now you're throwing a great feast for him. The father said, look, son, you're always with me by my side. Everything I've got is yours to enjoy. But it's only right to rejoice and celebrate like this because your brother was once dead and now he's alive. He's back with us. He's lost and now he's found. And Jesus is trying to reach these religious people who just cannot get it, that God is a God of great love, of great mercy, and he's reaching out to people and he wants to touch and change people's lives. The trouble with the religious people was like there was this sort of like the glow of self-righteousness. I'm better than them. I do all the religious things. But they missed the greater things of love and mercy, which is what God is about. And Jesus did tell the other illustration. Two men, I think I've used it before. The one is religious. He tithes, gives a tenth of everything he does. He does all the religious things he feels he should. And he sees another man who's a sinner, obviously in a mess. And the religious man prays, Lord, I thank you. I'm not like him. I do everything right, and I'm living a good life, not like that man. And the other man won't even lift his head to God, and he just says, oh God, have mercy on me, a sinner. And Jesus said, which one of those do you think is going to be pleasing to the Father in heaven? And it is always us with a humble heart saying, oh God, have mercy on me, strengthen and help me. And he can make big, big differences in our lives when we respond like that. And our lives can be changed. I did hear the story of a young boy who was out flying a kite. And, the kite's up there, it's doing well, it's a windy day. But the clouds come along and it's misty, and then you can't see the kite anymore. And somebody comes along and says, well, how do you know, you can't see that, how do you even know the kite is up there? And the little boy says, well, I know it's up, I can feel the tug. And, with us, there are times when the Lord is speaking to us. And everybody's individual, but you can feel the tug sometimes. He's speaking to our lives. He wants to bring change and to touch us and to use us to touch other people in these ways of extravagant mercy and kindness to others. So we're now going to finish with by singing our hymn of dedication, which, let me find it, is Glorious Things of Thee Are Spoken. And I think that's Zion, city of our God. They're actually talking about the church there. The people of God. It's number, did I give the number? 446.